Did you know that 94% of nursing homes in the US were cited for health and safety violations in the past year? That's not just a statistic. It's a silent epidemic that's robbing thousands of seniors of their safety, dignity, and savings. The average cost of a private nursing home room has now reached $108,405 per year, according to the latest Genworth financial survey. Yet behind these numbers are real people, like Patricia, whose stories are rarely told until it's too late. This video reveals 6 uncomfortable truths about nursing homes that every older adult and family caregiver should hear before making life-changing decisions. We'll also explore real practical alternatives that can protect your health, independence, and legacy. If you care about elder wisdom, financial protection, and emotional well-being, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and in the comments share. What does dignity mean to you in your golden years? Let's help more seniors age with power, not regret. The first truth is understaffing is dangerous. No one expects their loved one to suffer alone on the floor of a nursing home, waiting 40 minutes for help that never came. But that's exactly what happened to Patricia. James, her husband of 56 years, still remembers the way his chest tightened when he found her bruised, disoriented, and soaked in silence. 1 nurse, 25 residents. That was the night shift. But it wasn't just a bad night, it was the standard. And that's the first uncomfortable truth we need to face. Nursing homes across America are dangerously understaffed. This isn't an opinion, it's a crisis. According to the US Government Accountability Office, 95% of nursing homes fail to meet minimum federal staffing standards. The very people who are expected to care for the most vulnerable among us are being stretched beyond human limits. Certified nursing assistants, or CNAs, the backbone of direct care, are underpaid and overworked, often responsible for impossible workloads. The result is a system that relies not on compassion, but on sheer survival. The outcome is predictable: missed medications, neglected hygiene, undetected infections, and heartbreaking falls like Patricia's. James told me that Patricia's condition spiraled after that fall. What began as a small, treatable urinary tract infection became sepsis, a life-threatening condition, because no one had the time to help her hydrate or get her to the bathroom regularly. He wasn't angry. He was stunned. They had done everything right: the planning, the research, the money, and still, they had walked into a system where safety depends on luck. Why is this happening? Part of the answer is financial. Many nursing homes operate on thin margins, and staffing is their largest expense. Cutting staff or hiring minimally qualified workers is a way to stay afloat. But the other part is cultural. Elder care in too many corners of our society is still seen as an afterthought, not a priority. We build systems to house older adults, but we don't build systems to honor them. And the consequences reach far beyond bruises and bed sores. They shake the very foundations of dignity, independence, and trust. For every Patricia, there are thousands more, each waiting for a hand that may not come in time. But this doesn't have to be your story. There are ways to protect yourself and your loved ones. Visit facilities during off hours. Ask real questions about CNA to resident ratios, not just generic promises. Read ombudsman reports from your state. Look at staff turnover. If the caregivers are always leaving, that's a red flag. And most of all, show up often. The presence of family and community is not a luxury, it's a safeguard. Still, as painful as understaffing is, it's only the beginning. Because what happens when the staff doesn't have time to comfort, explain, or even listen? Often they reach for something quicker, something quiet. And that leads us into the second truth, one that's even harder to talk about: the widespread overuse of powerful medications behind closed doors. The second truth is overmedication is common. Sometimes, silence in a nursing home isn't peaceful, it's pharmaceutical. I met Grace in the quietest room on the 3rd floor of a care facility just outside Cincinnati. Her daughter, Lynn, invited me to visit. "She used to be a pianist," Lynn whispered, as we watched Grace sit motionless in a recliner, her fingers curled and still. "Now she barely lifts her hand. They say it's just her age, but something feels off." It didn't take long to learn the truth. Grace had been prescribed 2 antipsychotics and a sedative, none of which she had ever needed before. She wasn't mentally ill. She was anxious, adjusting to a new environment, and instead of support, she was silenced. This story isn't unique. In fact, it's alarmingly common. According to the US Department of Health and Human Services, over 20% of nursing home residents are given antipsychotic drugs without a proper clinical diagnosis. That's 1 in 5 seniors being chemically restrained, not because they pose danger to others, but because their behavior is inconvenient. Facilities under stress, with too few hands and too many tasks, often turn to medication as a shortcut. It's not a medical solution, it's a form of control. Medications like Seroquel, Risperdal, Haldol, and Ativan weren't designed for ordinary confusion or sadness. They were made for schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and severe psychiatric illness. Yet in too many homes, these powerful drugs are handed out to help residents settle down, sleep through the night, or stop wandering. It's presented as care, but the intention is often convenience. For the facility, it reduces risk. For the resident, it erases identity. Grace's daughter remembered when she first noticed the change. She stopped playing piano. Then she stopped speaking, and soon after, she forgot my name. Overmedication doesn't just dull emotion. It increases fall risk, cognitive decline, stroke likelihood, and even early death. For families, the shock comes late, after the personality has faded and the connection is lost, and often they never knew to ask what was really being given or why. But you can ask. You should. Families have rights and residents do too. Every psychoactive medication requires informed consent. You have the right to a full medication review by an independent geriatric pharmacist or physician. You can request non-drug interventions first, like calming environments, one-on-one support, or structured routines that reduce agitation without sedation. And you can assign a medical power of attorney who knows the person, not just the patient. What happened to Grace was avoidable. When her family intervened, demanded a medication audit, and brought in an outside specialist, they were able to taper her off almost everything. 2 months later, she was back at the piano, not like before, but playing with both hands again. That's not just recovery. That's resistance to a system that often chooses sedation over support. Have you ever seen a loved one change drastically after entering a facility? What did you notice first? The silence, the confusion, the heaviness in their voice? Leave her comment and tell us what you saw. Your story might help another family catch it in time, but even if we fix the medication, there's something deeper we still have to face. What happens when there's no one left to listen? What happens when the mind isn't dulled by drugs, but by days, weeks, and months of quiet neglect? That's the third truth, and it's lonelier than any pill. The third truth: loneliness and isolation destroy minds. There's a kind of pain that doesn't bruise the body, it empties the soul. And for many older adults in nursing homes, it comes quietly. No screaming, no protests, just silence. When I met Harold, he was sitting alone in a hallway near the elevator, staring at the same corner of the floor for over an hour. He used to be the life of our VFW hall, his daughter told me. Now he barely speaks. They say it's dementia, but I think it's something else. She was right. It wasn't just disease, it was disconnection. This is the third truth that rarely makes headlines. Nursing homes often fail to meet even the most basic emotional needs. According to a study published in The Gerontologist, residents spend up to 65% of their waking hours alone or doing absolutely nothing. And a separate review found that the average resident receives just 11 minutes of meaningful social interaction per day. That's less than the time it takes to finish a cup of coffee. It's not because these residents don't crave connection. Many were once active parents, professionals, and volunteers. But facilities today are often structured around physical care, feeding, bathing, toileting, while the human need for companionship, identity, and purpose is quietly pushed aside. Activities listed on colorful calendars are frequently cancelled due to staffing shortages, or they're too generic to engage those with different cognitive or physical abilities. So, day after day, many seniors are wheeled into common rooms, where TVs buzz in the background but no one talks, no one listens. And the consequences of this silent neglect are devastating. Social isolation among the elderly has been linked to a 50% increase in the risk of developing dementia, according to the CDC. It also contributes to depression, anxiety, and premature death. But perhaps the cruelest part is how it slowly strips away a person's sense of identity. Harold, for example, began forgetting names, not because his memory failed him, but because he simply had no one saying them out loud. Still, this can be changed. It starts with recognizing that emotional health is just as essential as physical care. Families can ask specific questions. How many activity coordinators are on staff? How many residents are engaged during those sessions? Visit during weekends or holidays, when facilities often run on skeleton crews. More importantly, create a visitation plan with neighbors, church groups, or friends. Even a short 20-minute visit every other day can anchor a senior in something real. Harold's daughter did exactly that. She arranged for members of his old veterans group to stop by, one at a time. They brought cards, stories, and jokes, and slowly, Harold began talking again. Not always in full sentences, but enough to remember a few names, and smile when someone mentioned the old fishing trips. Have you seen someone fade in isolation, or helped bring them back through presence and patience? Share your story in the comments. What you've learned could help another family protect what truly matters, because the next truth we have to face is even more personal. It's not just about loneliness. It's about losing the one thing that keeps us human: dignity. The fourth truth: loss of dignity is real. No one tells you how quickly a proud life can be reduced to a room number, and no one prepares you for the moment when the person you love is no longer addressed by their name, but by pet words meant for children. She was a professor for 30 years, Paul said quietly, as he looked at his mother, Judith, now curled in a wheelchair near the nurses' station. She taught hundreds of students how to think critically, and now they call her Sweetie. They pat her head, they wipe her mouth without a word. His voice didn't tremble with anger. It cracked with sorrow. Judith wasn't losing her mind. She was losing her identity piece by piece, under the weight of routines that ignored who she once was. Her new world didn't honor her as a woman of ideas, memories, or preferences. It treated her as a patient in a system. And that system was built for control, not for character. In many traditional nursing homes, dignity is the first casualty of institutional care. Residents share rooms with strangers, follow rigid schedules for waking, bathing, eating, and sleeping, and are often spoken to in simplified language that assumes confusion. It's not always intentional, but it's deeply dehumanizing. Studies have shown that when older adults are spoken to like children or have their routines stripped of choice, they experience greater levels of depression, anxiety, and even cognitive decline. A 2022 study published in Aging and Mental Health revealed that loss of autonomy directly impacts both mental and physical health in seniors, especially in long-term care settings. The erosion of dignity doesn't just wound the spirit, it affects the body too. What causes this? Often it's the pace of care. Staff are overwhelmed. The focus shifts from the individual to the checklist: feed, dress, medicate, move. The richness of a person's life gets buried under efficiency. It's not evil, it's mechanical. And unless someone steps in to reassert that this person matters, the silence deepens. Families can reclaim that voice. You can create a dignity directive, a simple one-page letter that outlines the residents' preferences, who they were, how they wish to be addressed, and what brings them comfort. Facilities with person-centered care models or small house designs are more likely to honor these directives. Even something as basic as calling someone by their full name, asking for permission before touching them, or allowing them to choose their clothing can begin to rebuild a sense of worth. Paul started bringing in a printed sign with Judith's photo and biography, placing it by her bed. He encouraged staff to read it. Over time, one nurse started calling her Professor. Another asked her opinion on a crossword clue. Her posture changed, Paul said. Her eyes had weight. Again. Have you ever watched someone's confidence fade in care, or helped them feel seen again? Share how you preserved dignity for someone you love. Because if dignity disappears, everything else begins to slip. And when finances enter the picture, the situation can spiral even faster. That brings us to the fifth truth, one that hits families where it hurts the most: their savings. The fifth truth: financial ruin comes fast. Most families don't realize they're standing at the edge until the floor beneath them collapses. When Daniel placed his father, Richard, into a reputable facility in Florida, he assumed their $300,000 in savings would provide at least 3 to 5 years of decent care. 3 months later, he sat across from a billing officer, stunned. The Tawase account was nearly drained. I kept asking for itemized breakdowns, he told me. The room alone was nearly $10,000 a month. Then came the extras: $350 for medications, $400 for adult diapers, $225 for laundry, $95 for cable and phone. It added up before we even realized what we'd committed to. This isn't mismanagement, it's the norm. According to Genworth, Financial's 2024 cost of care survey, the average cost of a private nursing home room in the US is now $108,405 per year. In states like California, New York, and Massachusetts, that number climbs to over $150,000. And these figures often exclude critical services, physical therapy, transportation to appointments, personal hygiene assistance, all of which can quietly add thousands per month. The illusion of all-inclusive care crumbles when you begin to examine the line items. Many older adults and their families still believe Medicare will protect them, but that's a dangerous misunderstanding. Medicare only covers up to 100 days in a skilled nursing facility, and even then only after a qualifying hospital stay. After day 20, the daily copay kicks in at over $200. Worse, many seniors are discharged early because they don't meet Medicare's improvement standard, which can be vague and inconsistently applied. Medicaid, on the other hand, does provide long-term support, but only once you've nearly exhausted your assets. Most states require individuals to spend down to less than $2,000 in total savings, and any transfer of assets within the 5 years prior to applying can result in harsh penalties. This setup punishes people for planning, saving, and trying to stay independent. Richard had served his country. He paid off his mortgage. He did everything the system told him to do. And still he found himself approaching financial collapse at the exact moment he needed the most care. But there are ways to plan smarter. Families should explore long-term care insurance before their 60s, while premiums are still affordable, and eligibility is likely. Hybrid life insurance policies with care riders are another option. Consult an elder law attorney about strategies like irrevocable trusts, spousal protections, or Medicaid-compliant annuities. Know your state's Medicaid partnership program. It may allow you to preserve some assets while qualifying for assistance. Daniel eventually found relief by transferring his father to a non-profit facility with a clear sliding scale and transparent billing. If I could go back, he said, I wouldn't wait until the crisis. I'd start asking questions 5 years earlier. Have you or someone you know been surprised by the true cost of long-term care? Share the lessons you've learned. Someone else might still have time to prepare. And while money can be rebuilt, time and spirit often cannot. That's why our final truth isn't about fear. It's about possibility. Because even in a broken system, better paths exist. The final truth: better alternatives exist. Most families believe they only have 2 choices: keep struggling at home or surrender to a facility that doesn't feel like home at all. But when James reached that crossroads with Patricia, he decided to ask a different question. What if there's a third path? Patricia had been in the nursing home for nearly 4 months. She was over-medicated, emotionally distant, and declining fast. Then one morning, she looked at James, blinked slowly, and asked, "Do you still live in our house?" That moment stayed with him. It wasn't just about memory, it was about disconnection. James didn't want her final years to end in a place that forgot who she was. So he brought her home. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. He hired a geriatric care manager to coordinate the puzzle pieces. They found part-time caregivers to help with bathing and meals. Patricia enrolled in an adult daycare center 3 times a week for mental stimulation and social contact. Their local church arranged rotating visits, and James installed grab bars, a stair lift, and a smart monitoring system. The cost? Roughly $7,400 a month, $2,000 less than the nursing home, with twice the attention and heart. This solution isn't fantasy, it's increasingly common. Programs like PACE, Program of All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, offer medical, personal, and social services to seniors in their communities, often at little or no cost, depending on income. Continuing Care Retirement Communities, CCRCs, offer flexibility, allowing seniors to transition from independent to assisted living without leaving their community. Even shared housing models, where compatible seniors live together with a caregiver, are gaining popularity. These options are often more affordable, more personalized, and more respectful of a person's dignity than traditional institutions. But they require planning. Many families never hear about these choices because they wait until a crisis hits. By then, decisions are rushed, emotions run high, and options feel limited. Understanding these alternatives early, ideally in your 50s or early 60s, can save more than just money. It can preserve independence, mental health, and the deep emotional bonds that make aging meaningful. Patricia didn't recover fully, but something important returned. Her eyes softened. She began responding to photos again. She even remembered the names of her grandchildren on certain days. And when she sat in their garden, brushing her fingers across the roses she planted decades ago, she looked peaceful, not drugged, not confused, just present. Have you ever explored or experienced alternatives to nursing homes? What worked, what didn't? Share your story. You might open a door for someone who feels trapped right now. Because while this might be the last truth we cover, today it's the one that holds the most hope for those willing to choose differently. Aging should never mean surrendering your dignity, your voice, or your independence. Yet too many older adults fall into systems that were built for efficiency, not compassion. Today we've uncovered 6 harsh truths about nursing homes, from understaffing and overmedication to emotional neglect and financial collapse. But we've also seen that with knowledge there is power, and with planning there is hope. If any part of this video reminded you of your own experience, share a few words in the comments. Even something as simple as, "My mother went through this too," or "We chose a different path," could help someone who's feeling overwhelmed right now. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, so more families can find the guidance they need before it's too late. Together, we can create a future where elder care is not something to fear, but something to trust. Because every person deserves to grow older with safety, respect, and quiet strength.